Welcome everyone. Last time we watched the fall and rise of Final Fantasy XIV part 1. However, there's also a part 2 to this documentary on how Final Fantasy XIV got like really popular and how it used to be in the past. Like Final Fantasy version 1 looked really strange and the way it was developed, but what it is now is wow, so great. It's one of the best MMOs. I'm having so much fun playing it recently. So yeah, let's have a look at episode 2 of this interesting Final Fantasy XIV documentary.
Hello Eorzeans, welcome back to the Fall and Rise of Final Fantasy XIV episode 2. In the previous episode, we talked about the planning and the initial design of Final Fantasy XIV. In this episode, we'll take a look at the actual product, leading into the alpha, beta, and the launch. The dev team was obsessed with the look and feel of the game, completely ignoring optimization in the process. They added these
performance was shit
right here, or I guess it's technically a barrel. And one of these flower barrels had approximately 1,000 polygons and 150 lines of shader code. And that is
what? Why would you do that for such a small thing? Oh wow, okay. Yeah, and then like all those players are logging in and they're trying to retrieve, like get the information of what's happening in this room or world, and okay, I can imagine where the lag comes from now.
Same amount of polygons and shaders as a character model. Chuck 8 of these in a dungeon and you've got a full party with a fair amount of lag on the side.
Exactly.
But one of the game's greatest assets was its music. Once again composed by famed Final Fantasy composer Nobuo Uematsu. It was the first time in a long time Uematsu was hired to do a game's entire soundtrack, and the first track he composed was the theme for Limsa Lominsa. Uematsu composed around 70 to 80 tracks for the game, all of which was composed following clear guidelines provided by the dev team.
Wait, but it's not the current theme.
Was also composed by Uematsu, and he picked Susan Calloway as the singer after watching her perform during a Distant Worlds concert in America 2 years prior to the game's release. The song would later become hauntingly foreshadowing for the events that would end the 1.x era a couple of years later.
What's going on now? Ah, I think that is like when the Realm Reborn started, right? I think I've seen this in a Realm, I've heard this in a Realm Reborn video.
The game's 5 playable races, Hyur, Lalafell, Miqo'te, and Rogadin, were directly based on the 5 initial.
Lalafell looks so cute here. And Miqo'te, very detailed. Wow.
Elvan, Mithra, and Galka.
Exactly, that's what I said in the first part. They're from Final Fantasy XI. And what's actually interesting is how the nose have changed. If you look at the Lalafell nose, it's different. I mean, it's still a bit darker, but it looks like more normal, like a human, right? If you look at like the Miqo'te nose, they had like this kind of like tint or like this darker color, and it was like very white. Now it looks way more humanoid, and yeah, the Rodakin, they are less hairy now.
With a few design adjustments to reflect the new setting. In addition to the main races, the developers also created 2 different clans opposed to the single clan setup in Final Fantasy XI. However, just like in 11, some of the races were gender locked, specifically the Miqo'te being female only and Rogadin being male only, which is odd, seeing as they wanted realism yet failed to introduce both genders and races. Shortly before the game was announced, there were still some on the development team that were worried. Tanaka and Komoto had a rather absurd vision for the game. They wanted it to resemble 11, but bigger and better, more realistic.
This was a success because it's better
than what was currently standard during development.
Wow.
They wanted less UI work, less
information. Yo, that armor looks nice. Is that for Paladin?
Battle system. It would seem that Tanaka and Komoto, although being great producers and directors for Final Fantasy XI, were both ill-equipped and unprepared for the current MMO market. Nonetheless, 4 years of planning and development is about to come to an end. June 2nd, 2009. A surprising announcement at the Sony E3 conference sealed the fate of the game.
Wait, what?
What the hell?
The game was to be launched in 2010 for PC first, then for PS3 later.
So that was the first release.
The gaming world. At the time, the safest bet would be a Final Fantasy XI 2, but here it is. Final Fantasy XIV. Alpha tests were slated for March 2010.
But they did
only
already
Final
have nice
Fantasy XI
trailers and
veterans
stuff.
could participate. And so the alpha opened in March of 2010.
Yo, where's this location?
People started realizing that something was terribly wrong. The graphical bugs aside, the battle system was a mess. Look at this icon here.
OMG.
This is a skill timer. You had to wait for it to charge to use a skill.
So slow!
Looks like a clever way to display a global cooldown, right? Wrong. You didn't even have auto attack. The most basic attack still had a skill timer.
Wait, there were no auto attacks in between? How was DPS in this game then? Then you must like make every skill hit like a truck or something. Because what if you can't auto attack in between or something?
In addition to this, the massive bar at the bottom there was the TP bar.
What's that?
This bar had to fill up to use certain skills, and it would only charge...
It's like stamina, basically, right? Like stamina. Yeah.
And get a load of this.
Wait, what?
The dev team decided to not implement forums during the testing phase. This was supposedly done
and you can't give feedback.
Issues with mistranslations.
Yo, that's so wrong, because that's so important to have forums so people can like report bugs and stuff, or say, hey, this and this deals not enough damage or too much damage. Like this helps with the balancing and the fixes of certain things, or they could say, oh, our NPC is not spawning, or it spawns too slow, or something like that, or like they could give some feedback, some very good constructive feedback, and this can help the game become better. Like forums are very important, not only for like bug reports, but also for like suggestions and ideas, or if you feel like something is under or overpowered, right? Yeah, that's so important to have a forum, for sure.
Related to news updates. So, they decided that instead of fixing the way news were translated, to just, you know, scrap the whole idea.
Can you not just employ someone that speaks English and Japanese?
Unofficial Final Fantasy XIV forums and boards, so the devs could see it. Yeah. And this is where it starts getting both strange and interesting. Before the game's release,
why is he looking so serious?
Yoshi Tanaka made several interviews to promote the game, and he's not exactly the most energetic and optimistic producer I've seen.
He looks very serious.
Seriously, I've watched countless interviews with him, and not only does the interviews look amateurish and boring, but the way Tanaka is acting and responding to questions makes it seem like he either don't care or is completely oblivious to what the game he's producing is actually about. Look at this bit.
He reminds me of one of my friends. I had like this one friend in high school, or this was like way back long ago, and there was like this quiet dude, and he would always like sit in a chair, and he would barely speak. He was always silent, look around, and he never, like, he barely smiled or something. He like always had this serious kind of face. But if he laughed, or when he was like really smiling, it was so extreme. Like people would like laugh at his laughing basically, but he would barely laugh. Like you would need to make a joke that's 10 out of 10. If you had like an 8 out of 10 joke, he would not even smile a bit. Like he was that serious. He reminds me of that classmate.
Look at this bit right here. This is an E3 2010 interview, right before the beta. The interviewer is asking Tanaka why Final Fantasy XIV doesn't have a jump feature. A rather basic feature in most games at the time. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that. Final Fantasy
You can't jump?
1.0 didn't have a jump feature. Pressing the spacebar activated the chat.
What?
So
why?
Why this feature has been omitted from Final Fantasy XIV, and the translator doesn't even understand the question. So the interviewer elaborates, and
why you can't jump?
The main reason is because we don't think it's important to have the functions in the game. They don't need to have the functions in the game. So that's the main reason.
Oh, but that's so weird, not jumping in an MMO game. But it's weird!
He laughs at the question.
Yeah, it's weird.
Jumping. Oof. Tanaka made several claims during the interview, like the fact that he didn't.
You can take shortcuts if you jump. I sometimes take shortcuts. I jump over rocks and not use the road.
Could be more fun than running around in a copy-pasted zone with no way of knowing where to go or where you are. Seriously.
Horrible. Yeah, I saw the map.
Maybe the reason Tanaka acted the way he
Chips
did
put
was because
together.
he felt the way most of the staff at Square Enix felt at the time.
Wow.
Final Fantasy is a cash cow, and the fans will line up for the milking. This was sadly somewhat true, but Square Enix was in for a rude awakening.
But if you don't have audience retention and the players keep unsubscribing and you don't keep the people to the game, like if you have games that are like a one-time price, right? Like you buy something that costs like $50, you have the game and you don't have like a monthly subscription. Okay, sure, you can milk out people like that, right? But if you have like an MMO with a monthly subscription and you pay like, let's say $13 a month, for example, isn't it better you make like a very, very good game and people keep subscribing for maybe even 2-3 years straight after they get the game? Aren't you making like way more money out of that? Like, yeah, let's say you sell 2 million copies and a game is really shit. Then those 2 million people will say this game is shit. And then you can't reach any more players, right, to buy the game. But if you have like an MMO that maybe costs you twice the amount of money to develop and maybe even twice the amount of time or whatever, and then you have like those 2 millions that buy the game and like 1 million decide to continue their sub, those 1 million might maybe even bring in 3 or 4 more million players because they have friends or they post on forum, oh, I've been playing this now for half a year, it's so cool, hey, you should get this. They're actually doing the marketing for the company then, because the players will tell others, hey, this game is good, right? Or like content creators like myself, for example, we will start streaming the game or make videos to that game. And if we do that for like a longer period of time, like 1 or 2 years, like some channels, they just blow up. Then they have like 200-300K followers. Maybe they cost for, I don't know, tens or hundreds of thousands to buy the game because they were like promoting it through streams and videos. Like, you should never make a shit game. You want a game that can be reviewed for a longer period of time and played for a longer period of time, and not when like the first or second month people like just drop out.
But Square Enix was in for a rude awakening. The beta test period was getting close, but Square Enix kept pushing the date back from its original August 2010 target date, due to all the massive issues that were reported during
That's
the
so
alpha
cute.
test.
I love
The biggest
Lalafell.
headache for the devs was the flawed battle system. They had to change it somehow, and finding the right way to change it without having to rewrite the entire system proved difficult. The beta test was pushed back until September 2nd, 2010, 29 days before official launch. During the beta test, non-Final Fantasy XI players got to join in, and they quickly discovered that this was far from what they expected. Countless issues were reported.
I feel like the graphics are worse.
And difficult UI,
Looks
graphical
like that.
errors, and low frame rate. The battle system, which had been revamped, had replaced the skill timer with a stamina system, working as a light version of the skill timer.
Look how slow this
Instead of
is.
having to wait for the timer to fill, you only had to wait until the stamina had reached a certain level, and then use the skill you wanted.
Yo, how long did
Some
it take
skills
them
used
to do
more than
quests
others,
and
so it was
dungeons
pretty
with that
easy to
speed?
deplete the bar and then having to wait.
Imagine doing a dungeon so slow.
The
Oh
TP
my
system
god.
remained largely unchanged,
Don't want to imagine
with the
that.
exception of the TP bar itself being placed underneath the hotbar together with the HP and MP bar. This is most likely the UI most 1.0 players remember.
It's not a pretty
today.
UI, not
They
at
also
all.
introduced skill timers to skills and abilities, making it more strategic and akin to most modern MMOs at the time. However, most of these skills could often not be used unless you had built up the sufficient amount of TP or MP.
And you don't have skills that refresh this or what?
Cooldown, with the exception of the regeneration of the stamina bar. Players voiced their concerns to the devs, but the game was getting so close to release, they had no time to make any major adjustments. A few bug fix patches were released, but these were minor and did not impact the battle system or the UI. It was later stated from sources inside Square Enix that more time should have been made to fix all the bugs that were reported.
Yeah, it was a rushed release.
Square Enix did not listen to the devs' plea, and the game was shoved into release for PC on September 30th, 2020.
No, but you should not do this in rush release. Like, there are a few games that are an exception with a rush release. For example, Skyrim. You guys know this, Elder Scrolls Skyrim. I used to be crazy addicted to that game, played it a lot. And this game turned out pretty good and well, even though it was a rushed release. But the downside of it is there was like, for example, a freaking arena. There was like siege combat and all sorts of stuff and features that were supposed to be part of the game and would have made this game better, even way better. And like some dungeons and zones that were not, and even quest lines that were like dropped. And if you like check into like the code and certain things, and some people like looked into that, they see that they're like incomplete quests, and there are some areas you can still find that are like completed. And this game was still a success, but just imagine if like someone would wait like 3-4 more months to release something, and those 3-4 months like release the rest or fix the rest, right? Sometimes it may even take like a half year, but the game would be much better then, right? But yeah, that's the issue often in like gaming companies. You have the devs that know the practical thingy, like the practice of how stuff is developed, how is it done, like what's complete, what's incomplete. And you have like the lead that has no freaking idea how freaking programming and making games work. And there's like this miscommunication often, right? Where the devs know the thing and how it should be or when it's finished. And there are like some people on the lead that have no idea about development, that just know like, maybe it's about marketing, about numbers, about like all those kind of economical thingies, right? And there's like a miscommunication. And then a game gets released too early and it's incomplete and nobody listened to the devs. I actually heard there were like some issues with also like World of Warcraft like that.
Damn. The game's release was successful in Japan, ranking number 2.
Yeah, World of Warcraft had also some
Japan, only
communication issues.
PlayStation 5 and ahead of StarCraft 2 Wings of Liberty. In the UK, it debuted number 10, behind games like F1 2010, Halo Reach, Civilization 5, and Prince of Persia: The Forgotten
It was
Sands.
really that high.
By November 2010, the game had sold 603,000 copies worldwide.
That's not a lot.
Square Enix had just made one of their biggest mistakes to date.
That's not a lot.
Final Fantasy XIV was not ready for release, and it was starting to show. With no official forums to ask for help, confused new players straight up abandoned the game after getting past the opening cinematic. If they stuck around long enough to actually get through the main story, they
Because it was a bad experience. Why would you stay there then, right?
As quest NPCs did not show up on the world map, and the maps had no icon descriptions
Really?
of any kind. Fun!
Wait, there were no icon descriptions, so there was no information on the map like, hey, there's this quest, you must go there, there's this and that, or like a spawning zone marked. Holy shit. I'm glad that we have this now in Final Fantasy XIV.
It gets even better. The map could not be resized. It had to cover the entire screen, and the only way to move the map... Actually, if you haven't played Final
There was
Fantasy
no mini-map?
1.0 before, just think to yourself,
No mini-map.
what would be the easiest way to move around a full-screen map? If you thought click and drag, well...
Yo, I always do that. I like if I look for stuff. I've like this mini-map on the corner.
And L, of course. But wait, there's more. Let's take a look at our gear. How do we get to our gear screen?
Wow.
Must be a hotkey,
This is a
right?
very good documentary, guys.
Nope.
Very detailed about
Pressing minus
Final
will
Fantasy
add
Beta,
Final
Alpha,
Fantasy
and version
or
1.
simply clicking on the main menu button would slowly open the menu. From there, click Gear.
Okay.
And behold, the beauty of the gear, a true work of art. Everything had to be accessed
OMG.
with the main menu. Want to check your inventory? Menu screen. Want to check your link shells? Menu screen. And now comes the truly reached part. A lot of you have already mentioned this in the comments section of my previous video. The fatigue system. I can barely explain this without sounding like I'm making it up. But here goes. The whole system was designed to prevent hardcore players from leveling faster than casual players. That's how you know it's a good system.
What the heck?
It consisted of 8 thresholds, each
Hey!
threshold consisting of 1 hour of combat EXP. As you gained experience, you would slowly
You should
build
not
these
do
thresholds,
this.
getting 100% experience.
Let
until you
hardcore
reach
players be
the 8th
hardcore players,
threshold,
come on!
After which, you would start to get
I don't want to
less
stop
and less
playing after
experience
2-3
until you
hours. I want to
finally
play
reach
10
the
hours
hard
straight. Come
limit
on,
and
let
no
me do
longer
this.
earn EXP. If you stop doing combat,
Like, I would be so pissed if I want to play a game for like 10 hours and after 2-3 hours they tell me you can't continue anymore. You know, there's something I actually hate currently about WoW Retail a lot with the Covenant. If you have like an alt character, like a second character, and you want to like level this one, you can't do like those kind of quests that give you like renown and stuff. You have to either farm it like crazy in dungeons, and this takes eternity. And yeah, there's also some blockade there. Oh my gosh. And that's the same with like Genshin Impact. Freaking resin and this and that, and then oh my gosh, I hate that.
or stop playing altogether, the threshold would
Like, I want to
start
play a long
increasing,
time. I don't want to
and you
be
could start
stopped from
getting
playing
EXP
after a
again.
certain amount of
And
time.
the thresholds were reset every week. In addition to this
OMG.
EXP system, for your physical level, 1.0 had a skill point system for your class level. The physical level gave you all the basic stats like HP, MP, battle stats, while the class system gave you skills and abilities for the classes you were leveling.
Okay.
And each class had its class level.
Gladiator.
These had their own separate thresholds, of course, so if your EXP threshold was reached, you could always start leveling your class level. when you reached your skill point threshold, you could switch to a different class and earn skill points there. And while you're doing that, the threshold for the other class starts decreasing. This is how you could learn cross-class skills in 1.0, by basically leveling the class level, but not the physical level. They defended this by saying it made it fairer for casual players, as they couldn't compete with the hardcore players. So, while casual players get to catch hardcore players...
I actually don't see the issue between casual and hardcore players. Okay, let's say there are two players. One is called Jeff and one is called Steve, okay? And Steve is the casual player and Jeff is the hardcore player. Now Jeff buys Final Fantasy XIV. Jeff reaches max level and has the max gear after just a month because he plays 10 hours a day, okay? And Steve, I don't know, has like 3 children. He has a job till 6 p.m. from 8 a.m. or something. He only gets to play 2 hours a day. Then Jeff will be at maximum in 1 month, and then Steve, what? After 5 months, he has the same. So what's the issue? Then this person grinds for 5 months and the other one for 1 month. This is still the same outcome.
Their vertical progression.
One is faster, one slower, but they after a half year they can meet together and do dungeons. They're at the same level.
With their class levels.
Just has to wait for Steve.
The real reason behind the system became abhorrently clear. Final Fantasy XIV had no actual endgame content at launch. The only system fully implemented to serve as side content was, you guessed it, the thing we saved from the first episode, leaves. Leave quests were supposed to be this game's key feature, the thing that separated it from the others. Quests you could pick up and do on the go, with shiny icons with beautiful stained glass paintings in them. These would keep you occupied for hours, right? Well, then you realized there was a time limit on these as well. Great. Just like in the current Final Fantasy XIV, you could only undertake leaves if you had a leave allowance, and in 1.0 you earned 4 allowances every 12 hours, and could stack up to a total of 99. So, if you ran out of leaves, and still had several levels to go before another main story quest, which was bound to happen, because the main story was spread out real thin, you were shit out of luck, and had to grind mobs in the wild. Again, this was to cater for casual players that would pop into the game after a long time away, complete some leave quests, and then come back a week later to do some more. Unsurprisingly, every leave plate had been designed with great care and detail, and each leave quest type had its own corresponding look.
Oh.
There were in total 8 types of Battlecraft leave quests at launch.
I think leaves are good for farming stuff as well, right?
Tenacity, veracity, wisdom, justice.
I think those cards from the leaves look actually cool. Here's like a Lalafell, looks like a Lalafell rogue or something, that like freaking hunt down, like, what is this? Oh, they have tails. So those are giant rats. I thought those were freaking rabbits. Then there's like a dragoon that slays a crocodile or something. There's like a bard on a chocobo. There's a Lalafell gladiator. There's like a bard while his friend is fighting. There are two people that seem to be having a bit of affection between each other. I love those cards.
And devotion.
Oh, devotion too.
2 types of local leave quests for crafters, constancy and ingenuity. 2 types of fieldcraft leaves, munificence and piety.
He's gonna have a big feast at night, yeah?
You could only do solo, equity and promptitude. I will read to you the
big
description
lunch
of one of them, so you can get a general idea of how the descriptions of these plates are.
I love the artwork.
Take this one. Everyone's favorite leave quest, tenacity.
Tenacity.
The Guild Leave plate portrays an Ellison archer riding a chocobo in a forest. These leaves always feature a monster that runs away, sometimes very far from its original place, and must be followed by the players to a certain spot, where more monsters will spawn and attack. Note that even if the fleeing target is killed before he reaches the reinforcements, those monsters will still have to be killed as well.
Oh, that's annoying.
Safe to say, 1.0 players learn to recognize the leave plates and select their leaves that way to avoid unwanted quests.
That's a cool leaf. I would do that actually.
Quest, you could not abandon it. You had to get it replaced and then clear it. There was no option to discard a local leave.
Wait, you cannot abandon those?
This was the only viable system currently in place at launch for players to enjoy, other than the main story and certain side quests. Or was it? There was a second system in place. Behests!
Behests.
These were basically just like leaves, except they would spawn randomly every 30 minutes, close to aetheroid camps. And they would not require a leave allowance. Yay! There isn't really much more to say about them though. They were basically just large.
Did they give a lot of
with
XP?
a level requirement and on a 30-minute cooldown. Oh, and they were open for everyone, so you'd often have large groups fighting for the same goal. So I guess it could be categorized as a forerunner to the Fate system implemented in 2.0, but that's stretching it a bit. So
wow, such horrible combat.
Running out of leaves meant you had to either grind for a very long time, wait for behests to spawn every 30 minutes, or stop playing.
Oh no!
Seriously, this game felt like it was active.
You never want this in any game, a mechanic where you want to stop playing for a time to have something come back or refresh.
In this episode. In the next episode, we will take a look at the teleport system.
The teleport system.
Market wards, and of course the critical reception.
How many episodes does this have?
I hope I've improved from the first episode, and as usual, that you haven't died from boredom. If you're still
no, how is it boring? It's actually interesting to see how 1.1 was, 1.0 was.
What you think of this video and your best and worst 1.0 memory. The best and worst 1.0 memories from my previous video is now being shown on screen. And subscribe for more amazing Final Fantasy XIV content and the continuation of this series. I'll be back in the fall and rise of Final Fantasy XIV Episode 3. Final Fantasy VIII is my favorite Final Fantasy game. May you ever walk in the
Okay, this was pretty interesting to see how the game used to be, but wow, after watching this I have so much more respect and appreciation now for Yoshi-p, like how Yoshi-p saved Final Fantasy XIV, because the Final Fantasy XIV that we are playing now is like a completely different game. Like sure, like some of the looks and stuff stayed the same, the lore probably is pretty much the same about races and stuff like that. But like if you look at like the combat system, the feeling of the environment that you can now jump and do this, and how like well developed Final Fantasy XIV is now, and how it became one of the best games that is out there, like it's crazy. And if you look at how it used to be, like it's just so unbelievable how Yoshi-p like managed to save this game and make it good. And I see now why they got rid of everything, including the engine and everything, and how they said burn this freaking game, just like in the video that I checked out of Final Fantasy version 1 in a nutshell. Like burn it, like exactly burn it, make a new game, because this, I'm glad that we don't have this anymore. Let's just say that, okay? But yeah guys, if you're new to this channel, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more content. I would also really appreciate if you like this video. This will help out with the YouTube algorithm. And yeah, that has been an interesting journey so far through this documentary. There are more parts, and we'll in time also check those out. So yeah, be prepared for more. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.